This is the third interview for the Vietnam Veterans Oral History Project 2025 to commemorate the 50-year anniversary since the end of the Vietnam conflict. We are joined today by Ric Vandett, E4 in the United States Air Force. Thank you for being here today.
My pleasure.
Okay, so first we're just going to ask some background information. So to start off, where were you born?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1945, 80 years ago.
And tell us about your family, your parents. You have siblings?
I had parents. Never knew my father. My mother raised us pretty much a single parent for most of her life. And siblings, I had three half brothers, three half sisters and a half brother.
Were any of your family members part of the military?
My brother was in the Marines, wounded in Vietnam, and still carries shrapnel around it today.
And what did your mom do for a living?
She worked at a bank and she raised children. That was pretty much her responsibility.
What were your first thoughts about the war, and did they differ from your friends or family?
You have to remember the time frame. I enlisted in 1962. Now, I enlisted in the Air Force. I just graduated from high school. I was 17 years old. I was lazy, didn't want to go to work. Had not taken any college preparatory classes. I was told I was not college material anyway. The only thing available for somebody my age at that time of life was the military. I did not want to do Army things. So I enlisted in the Air Force. And after 6 months of training, the Air Force assigned me to the Army. So I actually spent 3.5 years with the Army. That's why I say I was in both the Air Force and the Army. As far as my feelings about the war, 1962, there was no war that we were aware of. The United States had troops in Vietnam, but I would guess 90% of the American public had never heard the word Vietnam in 1962. By the time I had enlisted and after I was in a few years, we began to hear about Vietnam. I had no 17, 18, 19 years of age, really had no thought or opinion about the war. It was something that I really thought was far removed from me. It wouldn't impact me at all until it did. Then I began to have feelings about it.
So what were your friends and family's reactions to you enlisting?
My mother was a little surprised that I enlisted, but at the same time, she knew I had to do something as far as sitting at home. But I was 17, so I needed her signature for me to be able to go. And reluctantly, she signed it, but she thought that would be the best thing for me. And as it turned out, it was the right thing. I was too young at that point to concern myself with the necessities of life, food, clothing, and shelter. So for 4 years, that was taken care of for me. It wasn't always the best food or the best clothing or the best shelter, but I did not have to concern myself with those things. So by the time I did leave the military, I was better prepared to handle those things on my own.
What was leaving to go to training like, and where was your basic training?
Basic training was in San Antonio, Texas. Leaving was difficult, but I look at 17-year-olds today and I wonder, how did I do that? I lived on Long Island at the time. Took a train all by my 17-year-old self into the city of New York, negotiated my way to Whitehall Street with this big, huge building where all the people were being inducted into the military at that time, regardless of their branch of service. And it was just a huge building. There were hundreds of guys in there. And I really didn't have much feeling. And as I look back, that was a time of my life for the next year or so that I was particularly emotionless. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. I was just sort of numb. And that's what helped me get through things. I was not prepared to go in a huge building with hundreds and hundreds of other guys there, all dropping their clothes and putting their arms out for shots, and just it was a like a cattle call almost. I really didn't have much feeling. I was not yet homesick. I had to get some emotion to me in order to be homesick, but I knew I had to go through an awful lot before I even got to the base, and I just sort of emotionally shut down so I could get through it.
So Texas is definitely a different climate than New York. What was it like living in a different state for the first time?
Um, it was very hot for one thing, a little bit drier humidity wise, but I'm a city boy, and I've always been a city boy. But I didn't get to live in Texas as you would imagine. I was on a base, and bases are pretty much the same wherever you go around the country. The difference is the climate, and it was doing all the training in the hot weather and things. But it was October of 1962, so it wasn't as hot as it would have been in say August. But you get used to it.
What do you remember about your first day?
Again, emotionless, following the crowd. We took a plane from New York to San Antonio. I remember very little about except I think that when we got off the plane, and those are the days with a plane when you got on and off the plane on the runway. You didn't have from the airport itself a ramp or anything. You went outside. You climbed up the steps of the plane. When the plane landed, you went back down the steps. All of us on that particular plane were recruits. So we all got off and we were being yelled at from the time I got off the plane. Nobody was very courteous or nice. We had to get in line. We were called rainbows right away because we had all different colors of clothing on. And we were not uniform in any aspect. And that was the first day we were being told how to be uniform. We didn't leave the airport runway without having first learned how to stand to attention, how to stand at ease, how to do an about face, right face, left face, that kind of thing. They wouldn't even let us leave the airport until we had at least got that down. And then we had to march by rank. I'm trying to, I think to a bus station, must have been, it's hard to remember 60 some years ago, but we got on a bus which took us to Lackland Air Force Base. And again, just so much was going on. I really did not have time to think. I just reacted.
Did you make friends quickly?
I did. I wouldn't say friends necessarily, but we all bonded in a hurry. We're from most of us on that particular area, we're all from the New York area because we all met in New York, somewhere from New Jersey, maybe Connecticut, but in the whole area of New York City. And we did, I don't say bond necessarily, but we talked with each other, and that kind of helped because it's very easy to get lonely, to get scared, and all of us felt some of that because none of us knew what lay ahead for us.
What was your daily routine in training and was it difficult to adjust to?
It wasn't too difficult to adjust to. They, I think they came around 4:45 to wake us up. They gave us 15 minutes to be out front of the barracks in formation, completely dressed, ready to march to chow. We had early breakfast, and you learn the routine right away. You had to make your bed and everything. So most of us realized a shower was real important, brushing your teeth and that kind of thing, in a 15-minute time span, and get dressed and get out of there. You learned how to hurry and cut corners. Didn't worry about making a bed till you came back after breakfast, and that's when we spent time straightening up the barracks and cleaning. I think we had like a half an hour to get everything ready before we had to go back in formation outside. There was no downtime. You were always marching, doing something for training, and that's how it was for about 6 weeks in San Antonio.
What were your instructors like?
Actually, one of them was pretty good, a good guy. He was understanding at least, and uh, but he could also be demanding. We were out in formation one time, and one of the guys had made a mistake or something. So he told him, "Jump up." Well, the guy jumped up. When he landed, he said, "Who told you to come down?" And so some of us began snickering. Well, he didn't want anybody laughing at all. And those of us who were smiling, he said, "Wipe that smile off your face." You go like this. He said, "Now dig a hole and bury it." I mean, that kind of thing, where they're messing with your head, that they want you to respond to their command immediately, without thinking, without laughing, without doing anything. Just do it, and just those kinds of things. They push us and push us and push us. But one of the guys was pretty understanding, and he actually asked me to help him forge signatures one day. He thought I had a nice handwriting, which I didn't. You can tell from my signature. Hasn't gotten any better in 60 years. But he just wanted me to write names down. Why he picked me, I have no idea. But it got me out of some other things people were doing.
Did you go into any specialty training?
Not in basic training, no.
What was the hardest and the easiest part of basic training?
It was all about the same, to be honest with you. The physical um, things such as obstacle courses, rifle range, and things of that nature were a little bit difficult to start with. I had never fired a gun in my life until that point, and I did fairly well considering. The physical, the running, and things like that, I had no problem with. I was an athlete in high school, so I did okay. The mental aspect was always the toughest. The mindset was we need to break them mentally, so they will listen to us and just react automatically when given commands. There was no overly difficult and certainly no overly easy part of it. It just was.
What was your favorite and least favorite part about training?
I didn't have a favorite part at all. Least favorite probably was the obstacle course. I could do some things well, others I had trouble with. I did not have a lot of upper body strength, so when it came to jumping and grabbing the rope to help you climb up over the wall, that was difficult for me. I did because I had to use what little strength I had. I was about 145 pounds then, and just a little runt and trying to get over things. But like I said, you get through it. I wanted to pass. It was very, very important because not everybody passed, and those who didn't were sent home. I couldn't go home. It'd be too embarrassing.
What did you do in your downtime?
You were assuming we have downtime. The only downtime we had during basic training was in the evenings, and this um, we chatted. We would play cards sometimes. Um, just talk with each other. With some singing going on, but we didn't have books to read and stuff like that. That came later in training, but in initial basic training, it was just interacting with each other and sometimes just resting. We were dog tired.
How often did you exchange letters to loved ones back home?
Not often in the initial status. We were required to write a letter home sometime during the first week or so. Everybody had to write a letter home. And I don't think the letter was dictated so much as um, they wanted to make sure our loved ones felt that we were being taken care of. We're fine. Don't worry about your child. He's all right. And so we did. I have no idea what I wrote, but I'm sure I wasn't crying and "Mama, please come and get me." Nothing like that. Just I'm fine. Hope to see you soon, kind of thing.
Were parts of military life easier to adapt to than others?
When you say military life, that's the course of my 4 years. Yes, of course there were. that you it's easy to adapt to a routine, and even a basic training, because you went from basic training, which was 6 weeks, to an extended training. Now, there were some people who stayed in Texas for the second part of training. Others of us, me included, went to other bases for specific training, not just physical, but training in the field that we were going to get into once we got out of that particular training. I was sent to Illinois, and once you get into a routine and you know that routine, it's pretty easy to adapt to because everybody else is doing it. It's not like you're on your own, and everybody's marching together to chow. Everybody's marching together to the classroom and things of that nature. So it was. I didn't really have any problem adapting to the routine.
What specialty training did you go into after basic?
I had applied for interpreter school, but I could not get a top secret clearance because of some shady characters in my family. So, which is another story. But I got a secret clearance, and I was trained to be a weather observer. Real simple. And so I went to school in Illinois to learn how to be a weather observer. And in essence, a weather observer gives a lot of specific data to the forecasters, and the forecasters collect that same data from all over the country. And with that data, they can plot on a map where the cold fronts are, the warm fronts are, where storms are, and so on and so forth, which is information all pilots need. So I knew as I was being trained, I would be sent to an Air Force base. My job would be in the tower where the traffic controllers were basically, and I would do my weather observations, put them on a teletype machine. Information would go out. My other job would be I'd receive that information, and I'd have a map in front of me, and I would plot. I mean, they had tiny, tiny little circles representing airports, and I would plot information around each circle. The pen we all had was so fine pointed, you could write numbers and a lot of things around a very, very small circle. We got very, very, very good at that. So I was looking forward to going to an Air Force base and providing weather information to the pilots, but that's not what happened. We can get to that later.
We're actually about to get into
Okay.
that. So what happened after you were,
Well,
what were your orders from Illinois?
my last couple of weeks in training in Illinois, by this time, made a lot of friends, and we're enjoying it. We've learned how to adapt and enjoy ourselves because there was downtime in that setting. We go into town and have a good time. We were asked to give 3 places you would like to be sent. First, second, third choices. My first choice was New York. That's where my family was, and there are Air Force bases in upstate New York. Second choice was Ohio because I had lived in Ohio for a while, and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was in Ohio. Third choice was California because I'd never been to California. So I got New York, Ohio, and California. I get my orders, and I'm being assigned to an Army base in Georgia, Fort Benning, Georgia. And the look you have on your face is the look I had on my face. I looked at it, and I went to one of the instructors. I said, "They're sending me to an Army base." He said, "Well, they have an airport there. They have planes and helicopters coming in, but the Army doesn't train anybody in what we do." I said, "Okay." So here I am. Here I am now. 6 months earlier, I had said I didn't want to go to the Army, and now they're sending me to the Army. I ended up spending 3.5 years with the Army, 2.5 at Fort Benning, and then a year in Vietnam with the Army. So I had outfoxed myself pretty good.
When did you find out that you were being shipped overseas?
Well, let's see. I said I was at Fort Benning for 2.5 years, and in the spring of 1965, I got orders, or at least information, that I was probably going to be going someplace. I think it was midsummer of 65. Got orders to go to Korea. Now, in the previous 2 years, I did everything Army people did. I slept in pup tents. I went on maneuvers. Learned how to use my rifle even better, ate out of mess kits and things of that nature. I won, and every training possible the Army went on, I went on. And there was a lieutenant in our crowd that I got to be friends with, even introduced him to the woman he ended up marrying. And we were good buddies. I was I was not an officer, I was just an enlisted man. And got orders that I was going to Korea. I thought, okay, because by this time we knew about Vietnam. We knew because 1965, a lot of things are going on by this time. So I ended up going to Korea in August of 1965. I was there for 3 weeks when I got orders to go to Vietnam. And it was supposed to be temporary, 90 days. And I said, okay, I got to go, got orders. As it turned out, that same lieutenant had gone to Vietnam to set up a weather detachment in a place called An Khê, which is where the 1st Cavalry Division with 500 helicopters was stationed. And anytime a helicopter or a plane took off, there had to be one of us giving information. Well, he had 6 people under his command at that time, none of whom had ever been in the field. They'd all been on Air Force bases. Well, he had the same kind of training I had. And so he said, I know this kid in Korea, I could really use him. I was that kid. So because of my good old friend, Lieutenant Bob Ritchie, I got sent to Vietnam. And when I got to Vietnam, there was a colonel in Saigon who said, now you really like to stay the whole time, wouldn't you? Yes, sir. And I pretty much had to say that because when I left Korea, they gave me an M14 rifle with no ammo. And I said, well, what about the ammo? Well, you can't have live ammo on a plane. What am I going to do when I get there? Well, they'll give you some ammo when you get there. When I got there, I was met by a guy in a Jeep and to take me, and I said, I have got no ammo for that. So he pulled out a clip, but it was an M16 clip. I said, that won't fit. He said, well, I don't know about things like that. I felt really secure at that point, but things worked out. They gave me what I needed once I got, and I did stay. And Lieutenant Ritchie came down from country about 150 miles or so north of Saigon, and we went back up, and I spent the rest of the tour up country for 7 months, and then around Saigon the last 5 months.
Were you allowed to tell your family before you shipped from Korea to Vietnam?
That's a good question. I probably was allowed. I didn't on purpose. My mother knew I was going to Korea. I told her that. I did not want to give her any reason to get afraid and scared and worried by saying Vietnam. She never knew I was in Vietnam until probably the last few months I was there.
What were your first thoughts upon entering Vietnam?
I was surprised by it, to be honest with you. I was in a commercial flight from Korea, from Seoul, Korea to Saigon. And as the plane is coming into its approach, I'm expecting to see all kind of fire and explosions and stuff going on. Nothing like that at all. And landed at the airport, and it looked just like any normal airport. Busy people walking around, getting on planes, getting off planes and things. So, and then I meet the guy in the Jeep. He takes me, and it was very, very normal. And it's not what I expected. The normality ended quickly when got to the airport there, and there were 2 soldiers carrying a stretcher with a body on it. That didn't bother me too much for some reason. I knew there was a body because it was covered with a poncho. But one of the soldiers tripped just a little bit. They maintained their balance, but in maintaining their balance, they tipped the stretcher just a bit, enough for the leg of the guy, the right leg, remember, just sort of fell out, and it was dangling from the knee to his foot. You see that part dangling, and that hit me like a ton of bricks. I still remember that, had that picture in my mind, because all of a sudden that was a real body. It wasn't just something covered with a poncho. There was a guy there whose parents may not yet have known he had died. And the harsh realities of war hit me pretty good at that point.
How was your first day overseas compared to the feeling of your first night in training?
Um, Actually, it's somewhat similar in that I was just sort of numb, emotionless, but I was more mature by this point and not homesick. I knew I had a job to do. I had prepared myself without realizing it. All the training I went through at Fort Benning was preparing me for Vietnam. I didn't know that because the 1st Cavalry Division came from Fort Benning. It wasn't called that then. It was called the 11th Air Assault Division. And all the training we did is they were forming a new division. They called it Air Mobile. Cavalry generally are tanks, but the air cavalry was what the 1st Cav was helicopters. And so all the training we were doing was actually preparing us for Vietnam. And so I was kind of matter of fact about first day, not too different than my first day joining, but I was just more mature at that point.
Did you have a group of friends in Vietnam?
Eventually, yeah. In fact, my best friend is still somebody I met that very first day when we were getting ready to go up country. When I was in Saigon for 3 days, and Lieutenant Ritchie came down with a guy named Tracy. Tracy and I are still friends to this day. And in fact, I'm going to see him in a couple of weeks. So looking forward. We've known each other since 1965. So it's 60 years.
How long were you stationed in Vietnam?
1 year. September of 65 to September of 66.
How difficult was it to keep in contact with your loved ones back home?
It was very difficult to keep in contact. We could write letters, and we did. Um, we didn't have to worry about stamps. You wrote the word free where the stamp would have gone. And everybody knew it was coming from a war zone. We didn't get mail on a regular basis. We'd have to wait, and sometimes it'd be 2 weeks, and then when it came, we get 6 or 7 letters at a time. We did get stuff. My mother would send food all the time, and I'm Italian, so there's always be cheese and salami and things like that. And so she always told me, if it's little green, cut it off and throw it away. We did. The rest of it was fine. After we were there, again, this is early 1965, 65. White undershirts. All of us had white undershirts. Well, that kind of stood out in the jungle, so they wanted green. So I asked my mother, get me some undershirts and shorts, dye them green, and send them to me. And so she either dyed them green or bought them green and sent me stuff like that. So you would see old pictures of people in Vietnam in like 66, 67. They didn't have white T-shirts. Most they had green. And for that's why they were green.
Are there any memories or stories about your time there that you would like to share?
Oh boy, do I have some stories for you. Are you ready for some?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, and I have a few.
Okay,
right.
that's great.
First story was actually going from Korea to Vietnam. When we were sent to Korea, we were told you must wear your uniform when you go into the village. So I didn't pack any civilian clothes except one pair. I had some brown corduroy pants and a football jersey, a white jersey with a green number 5 on it. It was a Green Bay Packers jersey, number 5. And I put everything else in a big duffel bag to be shipped over to Korea. Well, I left Korea before that got to me. So I didn't have any civilian clothes when I got to Saigon. And there they said, don't wear your uniform in town, wear your civilian clothes. I said, okay, this is all I've got. So waiting, I hadn't yet, Lieutenant Ritchie hadn't come down yet. This is my first day. Some guys in the transient barracks said, we're going into town. You want to go? I said, sure. We went in to get a beer. So we stopped at a place called the San Francisco Bar. Now, it was a very interesting scene. There be GIs and girls sitting at tables. Now, the guys had a goal in mind. They're going to hook up with the girl. The girls were not hookers or prostitutes. They were bar girls, and they made their money by getting the GIs to buy them drinks. And they had green drinks in front of them. It was cream de menthe, watered down. And they made their money. I didn't know this at the time. I come to find out recently, and I'll tell you how I found out. But the girls, many guys would leave disappointed after spending lots of money. Well, I was by myself. The other guys I went in with, they went to the tables. I'm not going. I'm going to the bar. So I sat at the bar, ordered a drink. Now I'm looking in a mirror at the bar, and behind me I could see a table of girls giggling and pointing at me. I couldn't figure out what was going on. Well, one of them, the prettiest one, actually got up and came and sat next to me. And I said, okay. She said, do you want to know why we laugh at you? I said, yeah, why are you laughing at me? She said, well, we rate the American men. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, if you're really, really handsome, you're number one. Yeah, we like you. You're number one. If we don't like you, you're number 10. You're number 5. And we're laughing at, I said, oh, I'm Mr. Average. Is that right? Okay. And that kind of broke the ice between me and this girl. And then she began to tell me about that in order for me to talk to her, the rule was I had to buy her a drink. If I didn't buy her a drink, she went to somebody else. Her income was half the price of the drink. If I remember correctly, it was 180 piasters. And I don't know how much that translates to dollars today. I forgot. But it wasn't all that much. But she got half that. So every time I bought her a drink, she got half of that. The more drinks I bought, the longer she stayed and talked to me. Well, we became friends. And she became my friend for the whole time I was in Vietnam. And really, really liked her a lot. We got along super. And that was one of the stories. I had, when we got up country, I was afraid of snakes. Okay, didn't like snakes at all. And there was the village of Anke had some bars in it, and it was catering to the GIs, because in the side of the bar was beds with girls and the guys had to pay for. So I go into the bar, and when you go in from the sunlight into dark, it takes a while for your eyes to focus. And so I go to the bar, put my foot on the bar rail, and talk to one of my buddies. And we just chat. He says, you want to see a python? I say, yeah, I don't mind seeing them. I just want to get close to it. I said, yeah. He said, well, you're standing on it. You know, I thought it was a bar rail. It wasn't. It was a big wire cage with that snake wrapped around in there. And we all decided we were going to have some fun. And we bought a chicken. We wanted to see the snake eat the chicken. We went back to the camp, had a big old pit that was trash and stuff, be thrown in, ashes and whatever. And we put the snake and the chicken in the pit. We waited, and that chicken's just squawking like crazy. Didn't fly away, didn't move, it just right there. And the snake never ate it. I go to bed. Next morning, the snake is coiled up in the middle of the pit. The chicken is sitting on top of it. They're keeping each other warm. And the commanding officer of that area got really upset, and they airlifted the snake out and just dropped it in the jungle somewhere. They didn't kill it; they just put it in the jungle somewhere. And there are other things. When we first got there, we had a big tent. It was called a 14-man tent, 7 on one side, 7 on the other. Ours had 13 in it. I was on this side here. It's a 6th bunk down. Where the 7th bunk would have been was just a pallet with all our luggage on it. And then there was the 8th bunk after that. We first got there and built the tent. There was a tree stump, maybe about this high from the ground, and sort of a twig coming out from it. And I said, that's mine. And I put my cot up against it, figuring that when the tent flaps were up, I could just lean up against it, sit, read a book, which is what I was doing one night. Everybody else was out watching, doing something. Well, our driver came in, and he came down the aisle. I said, hey, Willie, how you doing? No comment whatsoever. You stuck up? Okay. I'm sitting there reading. Now, my legs are straight out on the cot. My back is up against the tree stump. And I see him out of the corner of my eye, pick up a rifle. He steps over the luggage and swings at my head. Well, I ain't no fool. I ain't gonna sit there and get hit. So I'm able to stand up on the cot now, and I'm twisting my body around to fight with him when I see the rifle hit a snake. Now that little part, a thing that stuck out, I take my helmet off and hang it on there. And comforts of home for me, The snake was underneath my helmet, and he saw that. So when I said hello, Willie, he didn't say anything. He didn't want to say, "Oh, there's a snake, man." He kept quiet so that I would not move. And he hit it, and it fell into the trench. You always dig a trench around a tent so the water would run off. And he's smashing it, and I was my tough macho self standing on the cot going, "Kill it, kill it, kill it." And he did, and my mother sent him more Christmas presents than she sent me. Those are just some of the things. I also brought some show and tell objects if you're interested.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Please.
And this is it kind of typifies some things from Vietnam that I think are learned lessons that I would like people to know about. I can put this down just a second.
Yeah.
And get them out of here. And I hope you can edit all this stuff out. Now, each of these has a story. And each of these stories sort of has a moral or something to learn about it. When we first got to Vietnam, now we're talking 1965, our boots were all black leather, all the way up to the top, right? And that's what mine were. But what we had was some of the first troops that got to Vietnam were casualties not from being wounded by bullets necessarily, but by some of the things going on that were happening. One thing is those in the southern part of Vietnam were walking through the swamps and the rice paddies and getting their feet wet. And they stayed wet. The socks got wet, and they would get jungle rot on their feet, and that would take them out of the battle. It was so bad. Other things, the most dangerous was something called a punji stick. That was a piece of bamboo that was sharpened at the point like an arrow. It was covered with excrement and all kinds of horrible stuff and put in the ground at an angle. And so probably that much should be over the ground, out of the ground. So most guys walking would not see, and they'd step on it, and it would puncture the bottom of the sole and go right into the foot and cause all kinds of infections and diseases and real serious things. Again, causing a casualty to get people out of the war. So the ingenuity, and this is what this represents, the ingenuity of the American mind. There's a problem, we're going to fix it. Just like when they went to Afghanistan and Iraq and they were being blown up, the Humvees were being blown up, they redesigned the Humvee. Well, they redesigned the shoe in 1965 to this. This is called a jungle boot. On the inside, there are two holes right here to let water out. If you step in water, you have to wait for it to come out, so it doesn't stay necessarily. The canvas helps the air to come in and out so it can breathe and help dry the socks off. And the bottom of this, there is a steel plate, so that if you step on the punji stick, you'd actually break the stick. It would not penetrate the foot. This is an actual boot that I wore. This is my shoe from 60 years ago. And I can't keep a pair of tennis shoes 6 weeks, but I had this for 60 years. All right, so this shows the ingenuity of the American mind. This shows the effects of war. We got hit one night at On K, and I was in what was called a two-man tent at that point. Half the tent we would do our work, and give that information to the pilots. The other half had two cots. And there was a door, a zippered door leading outside. And we had a foxhole that we had dug to get in when people were attacking us. I was at work one night, and not only is it zippered, but it had these wooden pegs on each side and rawhide interlaced to really secure the door. Well, we got hit. Bombs are coming in. Mortar shells are coming in. And so I couldn't unlace everything fast enough. I just hit the ground. I didn't get out. The moment I hit the ground, there was a big explosion outside. And our tent got shrapnel. Went over my head. I was fine. I didn't get hit. And when the battle stopped, I went outside. This is the thing I dug out that hit outside of our tent. It was a mortar shell. And I just kept it all this time. And I took it home with me and whatever. And our youngest son, when he was in kindergarten, took this to show and tell. And he had it in his backpack. It was heavier than him. He walked into school like so. If you were to look at it, now you're willing to look at it, there are colors on the top. When I moved to California, I put this on an end table next to my couch and put candle on top of it. It was a candle holder for me and my roommate for a long time. But this represents what war is really about. People die, people get hurt. The fact that my brother still carries shrapnel around from a mortar round is a test to the fact that you don't want to glorify war. This really, really happens. The hat is a different story. After spending 7 months with the 1st Cavalry Division, I got transferred to the 1st Infantry Division, further south in all cities around Saigon. And we were on a mission to a place called Tay Ninh, which is near the Cambodian border. And I had some time off, so I went into the city of Tay Ninh, found a bar. I always like finding bars. And I go in, I'm by myself, I sit down, and an ARVN, it's ARVN, it's Army of the Republic of Vietnam, soldier sits next to me. And we struck up a conversation. And I was in there for an hour or so. I had a beer at 12, and I was feeling pretty good by the time I left. And we started walking, and he came with me. Now, there is a cultural phenomenon with which I was not comfortable or understood much. And that is in Asia, not just Vietnam, but in many parts of Asia, males who are friends with each other often hold hands walking down the street. It's not homosexual or anything like that. It's heterosexual males, but they're friends. It's holding hands. It's common. It's understood. So he grabbed my hand. And I had about a millisecond to say, hey, man, I ain't like that. But I understood this was his country. This was his culture. So I held his hand all the way to the end of the block or whatever. I was going one way. He was going up the other way. We shook hands, and he gave me his hat. And it's tiny, because he was barely 5 feet tall himself. But I've kept this hat all this time as a sort of a reminder of how important it is for us as Americans when we go to some other country to understand their cultures, that we're guests, so to speak, in their countries. We can't go imposing our culture on them. That's not right. And understanding their culture. Many of the women, we have some of the women in our Foothills Veterans of Veterans who are veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan. And when they went into the village, even though it wasn't what they like to do, they would cover their heads because it was the culture of the place. And whether they believed it or not didn't make any difference. I didn't necessarily believe in holding hands with men while I'm walking down the street, but that was their culture. And I learned a great deal from that and how important that is. And that's just a few of the stories I've got anyway.
Amazing.
So I have one more. I'm sorry. Because it may not come up in here.
No, please,
I want you to hear it. I went to, when I got out of the service, this friend of mine, Tracy, he got out before I did, but he waited for me to get discharged in California, San Francisco. And so we went our separate ways for a few months, and then we both went together to live out in California. So I went for a job application with United Parcel Service in downtown Los Angeles. being a veteran, it was preferred candidate. They really wanted to hire veterans if they could. They wanted to hire me. They looked, I had very little work experience. I went from high school to the military, but I answered all the questions well enough. He said, "Well, what we want, if you can pass the physical, our doctor's office is just down the street, just down the hall. Pass the physical, you're in." I said, "Thank you." So they sent me to the doctor's office, and he said, "Well, take off your shirt." I took off my shirt, and I had a scar that went all the way across. It was real dark against my skin. And he said, "Well, what happened?" I said, "I got that in Vietnam." He said, "Well, you're hired." I said, "Thank you, sir." I didn't tell him I got it playing football. I didn't lie to him, but we had some downtime, and it's shirts and skins playing football. And I was going out for a pass, turned my head, and as the ball hit my hands, I hit a tent rope going as fast as I possibly could. My legs actually came up, and the top half of my body went over. So I'm hanging on a tent rope just like this. I caught the ball. I was real proud of that. Didn't drop it. It was a touchdown, and I'm very proud of that. But I had one heck of a rope burn. Now, this was in late summer of 66. The interview was January of 67. And so, and the scar lasted a lot longer than that, for another year or so. That's how deep the cut went. And I have a picture at home. I wish I didn't think about bringing it with me, of me standing like this, trying to show off my cool body and all. But this scar that went across got me the job, and I didn't lie about it.
That's crazy. I love that. Okay. You were only stationed in one place in Vietnam, right?
No, two.
Two. Okay.
With the first Cav, I was at a place called An Khe, Ankhe, 2 words. There's a village called An Khe there, but then they built this huge base for over 500 helicopters. There was also a fixed-wing airstrip about 3 miles away, and we worked at both places. The fixed-wing airstrip brought in troops and goods and stuff like that nature. But then after 7 months, I got transferred to the 1st Infantry Division, and there were a couple of camps I've rotated from Phuc Vinh and Phu Loy. We're 2 of them. There was another one, I can't remember. It was about 20 miles north of Saigon, totally different climate than from the Highlands. The Highlands in An Khe, very much like where we live here in North Carolina, in the western part of the state. Very similar terrain.
So what did you do when you were off duty?
Played football. Off duty, it depends on where we were. Now, if we were at the big area, that's where we played football because we had most of our guys with it. By this time, we had close to 30 people in the outfit. So Lieutenant Ritchie was no longer the commander because he was a lieutenant. We had a captain come in who we did not like. He was another person never had any experience in the field. At least Lieutenant Ritchie and I had. So we were helping everybody else. But there'd be games. There would be drinking. Guys had some guitars and stuff. And we just chill out as best we could. If we were stationed at the fixed-wing airstrip where the planes came in, there were only 3 of us at a time. And I would ask for that duty as often as possible because I didn't like the captain, didn't want to be around him. When I was at the fixed-wing airstrip, I could let my hair grow. I could not shave. Nobody checked on us. So I had to clean my act up when I went back over to the big camp. And I just liked being over there so nobody's bugging me. And I forget what the question was now. Well, downtime. It was almost a lot of downtime there. Well, all we had to do is we're there 24/7, just provide information for the pilots. And we became friends with the pilots because it's a very small area.
What was the entertainment while you were stationed there? I know a lot of people got to see certain big names from the States.
There were some USO. I saw at that time one of the biggest rock stars, a guy named Bobby Rydell. And he came with some other people. My favorite, and you can look this up later, was a woman named Martha Raye, Raye. Google her, and you see, and she's gone now, of course, but She was a comedian, but when she spoke, she loved every Vietnam vet, every soldier who was there. She made us all feel that she cared about us. Very, very special. I got to see one of the Cardinal Spellman, I think it was, from New York, was there. I could have gone to see Bob Hope because I was off duty, but one of the other guys who was almost in tears wanted to go see it. I said, "Go, I'll take your duty." I mean, it's a crowd. Ann Margaret was there. I got to see Ann Margaret and stuff like that. The USO shows were really good relief for guys. But some of our guys had guitars, and we were the entertainment. We entertained ourselves.
What did you do on leave?
Well, it wasn't called leave so much when we were in Vietnam. What it was called was R&R, rest and recuperation. When I first got there, the only place you could go was Bangkok. Then they opened up Hong Kong, and I think Australia maybe by the time I left. I can't remember now. People who were there after, because I got there when first got 1965 when things were first getting going. I left on K 6 times to go on R&R and never made it out of Saigon. Guys would give me money to buy things for them. Now, I never spent their money. I spent my own. But it would always be that I'd get to Saigon like 10 o'clock in the morning. The plane for Bangkok wouldn't leave till 3 or 4. So I'd do a couple of things. I'd go to a restaurant, get something to eat, and I'd contact that girl I met, who number 5 girl. Her name was Lee. Contact her. I'd get up with her, spend a few days with her. My R&R is over with. I'd go back up country. So I spent my R&R with her, and until something bad happened to us. I'll tell you what that was. I went to go on R&R once, saw her again, and I always went to the bar or where she lived, and she gave me a note, and she said, "Meet me here tonight." And I said, "Okay." Her English is very good, by the way. And so I did, and it was an address in the Chinese part of Saigon. It was a pretty rough part. And I didn't have any problems. So I go there, and she's visiting a friend of hers, and it's like on the 2nd floor of a 4 or 5 floor apartment building, and we're in there, and at night, we're lying down, about half asleep, and I hear a commotion, and her friend comes into the room, and she's jabbering in Vietnamese. I don't know what's going on. And Lee says, "I've got to leave." And I couldn't go out the door. The only way out is a window, and I'm on the 2nd floor. So I had to jump out from the window into the alley. And I managed it okay. Now, what I was wearing is important too. Remember I said you could not wear your uniform in town. You had to wear civilian clothes. Well, by this time, I'd bought some clothes, and it was comparable to what the young teenagers were wearing, because I was 20 years old. The teenagers were wearing in Vietnam. It was a shirt like I'm wearing now that you wore outside your pants, and some dark slacks and sandals. That's what I was wearing. Well, the teenage toughs and guys in their 20s were called cowboys for whatever. I have no idea why. But that's a reputation they had. They better watch it. They're going to pickpocket you and steal your watches and whatever. So I jump out, and I realized Lee told me that the police were rounding up people and checking their papers. It was past midnight. They had strict curfew in Saigon. You had to be in your own area. Lee wasn't. She was in the Chinese area. I didn't have any papers. I'm American. All right, but at midnight, I'm supposed to be on base or away, not on the streets. Here, it's well past midnight, and the police are coming down the alley. Police in Saigon wore white uniforms, white hat, white shirt, white pants, white shoes. We all refer to them as white mice. And I'm hiding behind a trash can, and they're coming down the alley. I got nowhere to go. So I just stand up very slowly with my hands straight up in the air. and one of the cops comes and puts a pistol right to my head, just like that, up against it. I could feel it. And he looks the way I'm dressed. Oh, you're a cowboy, cowboy. I said, no, I'm not. And they realized I was American. I had dark skin, and it's late. And so when they realized I'm an American, they start laughing at me. And so they take me out to the street where the captain is. And the captain, speaking English, what are you doing here? I wanted to find a girl. That they would believe for an American. And they all giggle and laugh. And then I can see about a block or so away an American MP Jeep coming around a corner. And I pointed, and I said with few Vietnamese words I knew that I'm in trouble. The captain said to his friends, to the men, you form a line, and he put me behind the line, and I bent down. So the MP Jeep going by didn't see me, just saw a line of the white mice there. And but I saw a big truck, 2.5-ton truck, and people being loaded on the truck, one of whom was Lee. I never saw her again. Never knew what happened to her after that, because she did not have papers for her area. When they checked her papers, she was out of district. Now, what they did, I have no idea. And I couldn't go back to the base because past curfew, and the captain understands that. So he tells one of his guys to take me to a house of ill repute that he owned. But I went there to sleep, that's all. And got up next morning and walked onto the base, and that was the last time I went on R&R, which I never did go anyway. Hope it's still green here.
It is.
Okay. Anyway, got back on the base and went back up country. So I never really did go on leave. I had adventures, to say the least, but never left the country.
What was your rotation home like?
The rotation home.
Yeah. Or did you just stay there for the full year?
Well, it took a while for me to get home first. As I said, Tracy, my friend, was waiting on me. He left country before I did. Got to San Francisco. The actual Oakland is in Oakland. It was Travis Air Force Base, and you have to work doing something for a couple of days before you get discharged. They made him a clerk, which he wanted. So he had his papers be discharged. He put them down, put them on the bottom of the pile, waiting for mine to show up. When mine showed up, he was on top. And so he got out a day before I did. He rented an apartment close by, and for one night, or a room one night, and then he came waiting on me to get discharged. Now, I never knew that story until later, years later, when I wrote a book about it. He said, I might as well tell you what happened. He never did. He just said he waited on me. I thought he waited for a month, just one night. And so we hit San Francisco that night, and an interesting fad had started in 1966 called a topless craze. We had never heard of a topless craze, and there were topless bars. You never heard, I mean, seriously, Google topless bars in 66. That became a fad throughout the United States. There were topless shoe shine parlors with girls shining shoes, shaking all over. I mean, I was just, after spending a year in Vietnam, I was going crazy. And we went to bar after bar. We went to a jazz place, got listened to great music and drinks. It was just a great time. Poured ourselves onto a plane, went to Los Angeles, to Hollywood, where he had a relative, stayed there for 2 days, went to Universal Studios. She dropped us off there where she went to do something else. But it was quite an adventure. I knew a girl that lived in Arizona, so I contacted her. She said, well, you can spend the night here. I spent the night with her there. And then we just took our time, and then we ended up in Buffalo, where he lived. Spent a few days there. Finally flew from Buffalo to New York, where my folks lived. My mom was so angry. She knew I'd gotten in the country about 2 weeks earlier. Why did it take me that long to get there? But she forgave me. And Tracy and I stayed in touch. I went to work, pretty quickly. Got a couple of jobs, basically. Found a girl, started dating her, because all the girls I was dating dropped me, like, pretty quickly once I got to Vietnam. I got more Dear John letters, and from girls I wasn't even dating, I got letters from that. I want to make sure I didn't come back to them. And so I started dating this girl, and then Tracy called, and he just wanted to go, go to college, and but we started on an odyssey. We had my car, and I went to pick him up. I drove from New York to Buffalo to pick him up the first week of January of '67. Took us a month to get to, because that's too long a story to tell you here today, I think. But we actually went to see Lieutenant Ritchie, our old buddy, and finally made it to California in time to enroll at a Los Angeles Valley Junior College. And that's what got me started in going to school.
What kept you going while you were overseas? Did you have photos of loved ones from back home, or?
Yeah, all those girls who sent me Dear John letters, I had photos of them for a while, but you don't really think about it, to be honest with you. The mindset that I had, I think most of the guys had, was this is our job. We're going to do it. We're not sitting here afraid of, we're going to get attacked and stuff like that. We got attacked. I was in a firefight. Those things happen. But for the most part, you're doing a job. You're going through it. You are counting the days. That's one of the biggest differences between Vietnam and, say, World War II. World War II, you didn't get to come home, basically, until the war was over. Win the war, go home. Vietnam was different. If you last a year, you get to go home. So there was no incentive necessarily, subconsciously at least. Let's call it win this war so we go home. Let me survive a year so I can go home. And I think that was not the right way to handle things. I've got lots of opinions about that. But as far as going through the daily things, what kept me going was I have a zest for life. I want to live. I get so much more. I did not know what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew I wanted to do something. And keeping alive, staying alive, making sure, thinking about maybe getting an education, even though I wasn't college material. That kept me going. It wasn't so much family, and my mother and I were very close, and I wanted to get home and see family. And the pictures didn't keep me going. Just my own inner drive kept me going.
What was your last night in Vietnam like? What were you feeling, and what were the feelings around camp?
Well, it's hard to say what it was like, but I have an image that I'll never get out of my head. The last day in Vietnam, I had to go through out processing, get this form signed and go to that building. And I had to go to the medical building, had a big old Red Cross on it, to get things signed that I was healthy enough to leave, no diseases. I walked in the wrong door, and I walked into the morgue. Now, what I first saw were about 3 or 4 guys sitting around a table just playing cards. But beyond them was table after table after table of bodies. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Gone with the Wind. I can't make the reference if you haven't seen it. But anyway, it was just bodies. And there's no emotion. I just saw them. And I remembered the emotion I had when I saw that foot dangling the first day there, and how sorry I felt for that guy and his family. I had no emotion whatsoever looking at all those bodies. And I remembered at that time, I'm emotionless right now. I just want to go home. It's not, oh boy, I'm going home. It's just, get me out of here. I'm ready to go. And that was like my last night. What happened at night, I don't remember. I don't remember where I slept, what happened, what I ate. I remember that picture of the morgue itself. And the next thing I know, I'm on a plane and we're going home. When we landed in the United States, everybody's jumping up and cheering, and I'm just sitting there, knowing I still had 3 more days of out processing to get through. Let me get through it and get out of here.
How were you greeted when you returned home? I know some soldiers that came home, closer to the end of the war had slightly different reactions
Yeah.
from the public than people that were.
I was not spit on. I was not one of those guys who was people pointing at me saying it was a non-event getting home. Because don't forget, we landed as a bunch of people. And when I got discharged, I wore my uniform until I could get it changed, until I get changed at the bus station, basically. Put my uniform in a locker, wore civilian clothes as we hit the night in San Francisco, and just got home. I was not wearing a uniform. I didn't come off a plane with a uniform into a civilian airport. There was no reason for everybody to single me out. And besides, that's like you said, toward the end of the war, that stuff and the major protests began to happen late 67, 68, 69, 70. From then on, serious protesting going on. The war had not impacted the American public to the extent that it did eventually when I got home.
Eventually, when you learned that America was pulling out of the war officially, finally, what did you think about that?
I was pretty sad about it and angry at the same time. And if you're familiar with the movie Star Wars, the original Star Wars movie, Han Solo and Luke Skywalker go to rescue Princess Leia from this prison. Well, they get her out of the cell, and they're dressed up like these old stormtroopers, and they get in a fight. And she says to them, "You had a plan to get in. Did you not have a plan to get out?" And I'm thinking Vietnam, I'm thinking Afghanistan. We had a plan to get in. Did we not have a plan to get out? And we're in Vietnam since 65 to 75, basically. All right. Did we not have a plan to get out? What was it all about? And serve a year and go home. I was in on a briefing once where we were told we were going to hit this village. Now, again, I'm not infantry, but I carried a rifle. I got to shoot it a few times, but I was in a briefing because of my job. And we were being told they were going to drop leaflets on the village to let them know they're going to be hit, to get the women and children out. Now, if you're the bad guys and you see that, what are you going to do? You're going to leave the women and children there. And so we couldn't attack the village with the women. I mean, how stupid was it to let them know we're coming? It were so many insane things. We won so many battles, but we didn't win the war. And it was a war of attrition. They outlasted us. I think by the time the protests got started with Jane Fonda, ask most 99% of the Americans who served cannot stand Jane Fonda to this day because she sat on a tank, aircraft gun or whatever, and was cheering on the North Vietnamese. And that gave them, in our opinion, we could be totally wrong, but I think it gave them that, and the protest gave them the resolve to last it out, thinking we didn't have the resolve to keep at it, and we didn't. All the protests, all the money spent, all the 58,000 Americans died. It was too much for this country to say, okay, we're gaining nothing. We could beat this village, we leave, they'd be right back in it. Similar things happening in the Middle East. So when it ended the way it ended, I was angry, and I'm thinking, what for? A lot of people say, well, it was for nothing. Those people died for nothing. I'm not going to go that far. Every American who signs the form to say, I'm going to represent my country, should be honored for doing that. The 58,000 who died represented their country. And knowing at any time, they didn't enlist to go to war, but they enlisted knowing they could go to war and be prepared for it. Anybody to this day who serves, if you have children, they enlist in the military, they're representing this country. Hopefully there's no war, but there could be. And they go in knowing that. So they didn't die for nothing. They died representing their country. But it was a waste in a lot of ways that it should not have happened. Once we realized how things were going to go, we could have said, we win, let's go home. But we didn't.
Was it hard to adjust back to civilian life?
Actually, it was not. Again, it's a mindset thing. For a lot of people, it is hard to getting back. When you come from war zone to a civilized society, for some people, it's very, very difficult. There are some people, many Vietnam vets carry in scars inside them right now to this day. For whatever reason, I didn't let it bother me too much. I didn't think. I was keeping things pent up inside that when I first got to visit the wall, Vietnam Wall in Washington, it all came out many, many years later that I'd been keeping things inside. But initially, when I went home, had to get a job, got a job, stayed working until Tracy called, said, let's go out west. And we did that and lived out in California before I got married, had children before earthquakes hit. I was through 5 earthquakes, moved back to New York and got a job in North Carolina as a radio announcer, which is what I wanted to do, and been in North Carolina since 1971. I was going to work my way back up to a major radio station in New York. I just haven't done it yet.
Did the GI Bill help you make the decision to go back to
Yeah,
school?
job helped me a great deal. As a matter of fact, when I first got married and I had 2 kids and moved to North Carolina, they were babies. My wife was at home taking care of them. I was working at the radio station, but only making $90 a week. It's hard to pay the bills. And a friend said, why don't you go to college? I said, I can't go to college. He said, well, the GI Bill would help you. And I thought, okay. So I enrolled at Wilkes Community College and I had to get 14 hours. I was working as a disc jockey and going to school full time. I worked in my classes all around my schedule. And the money came directly to me. It didn't go to the school. And so that helped me. It was just enough to pay the bills. And I did my 2 years at Wilkes Community College. And a friend of mine said, well, now that you finished there, you're going to go to Appalachian? I said, no, man. He said, why not? I said, I'm 28 years old. If I go to school in 2 years, when I graduate, I'll be 30. That just sounded ancient, He looked at me and said, well, how old will you be in 2 years if you don't go to school? I said, duh. I'm going to be 30 no matter what. Might as well go to school. So I transferred to Appalachian. All my classes were starting at 10 o'clock. I was on the radio from 5 in the morning to 9, drove up the mountain from Wilkesboro to Boone, and did that for 2 years. Had a coach's show going on while I was a disc jockey. And when I graduated, one of the coaches said, you want to help me coach? I said, if you can give me a job teaching, I'll help you coach. I majored in English in college. And so I got a job as an English teacher and a football and basketball coach and did that until a lot of honors came my way. And then I became an administrator, became an assistant principal at a middle school in Hickory, became a principal at an elementary school in Hickory, became a director of the central office, assistant superintendent, and then finally retired as superintendent of schools in Hickory in 2009.
What were your opinions about protests and draft dodgers, and how did they maybe change over time since that time period?
Over time, I get real strong opinions about draft dodgers. At that time, I was calling them cowards. Now, today, I'm mellowed somewhat. But, if you are convicted in your own mind totally that what's going on is wrong, you have to make a choice for yourself. And so I understand that. I made a choice to stay. I didn't, because again, it's 1962 when I enlisted. And I enlisted on purpose. They didn't have a draft then. That happened a little bit later. But the protests, I think, again, my opinion, science might not back it up, but I think the protests helped prolong the war and did us no good. Again, people exercising their right to protest. And one of the things that when I was teaching, a student came in, one of my football players came in angry as fire. He said, Coach, so-and-so said something about burning the flag. And he said, you got Coach Vandett's class next, and he's not going to like that. And when she came in, I told the whole class, no, I don't like burning the flag. However, I served in the military for your right to do so. This is a free country. And as Americans, we need to keep the freedoms we have, even if we don't like some things that some people are saying. Freedom of speech. You take away our freedom of speech and other freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution, we're no longer the United States of America. We've become more of a totalitarian country. And so, while I didn't like the protests, I understood them. And I think you have a right to protest. Protesting today is not prolonging anybody's war. It's not a war going on, for the most part. Back then it was different. I think the protests prolonged war and may have cost more American lives at that point.
We need to pause for just a second because I think that your microphone has died. So we may need to switch them out right fast because I just saw his mic go off.
Oh, it's back. It's on.
Blinking.
Oh, it's on. Okay.
Okay.
Good. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and ask you the next question.
Yeah. How has service changed you?
But it matured me. I mean, I grew up in those 4 years. I said earlier, not having to worry about the necessities of life. By the time I was 21 and out of the military, I was prepared for things. I wasn't going to find anything any worse in the United States than I had to go through in Vietnam. A lot more mature, and I could handle things. To this day, I can handle things. I can take care of it.
Now it is blinking.
Okay.
So we're good.
We can edit this part out, but
Yeah.
we'll cut for just a second and switch out the microphones,
Sure.
and then we'll.
Those are pretty cool.
Yeah, they're really nice. I really like these things.
They're a pain to charge because you got to charge them individually.
Yeah, that's the only.
Sometimes we don't get everything.
I know about that. I sing
this is
in
for
our,
the new one.
I sing in our
That's for the
band
new
at
one?
church, and I have to charge your batteries and the microphone and
Oh.
my headset. Same way. Why are you doing this project?
Really, because I think it's important. It's been 50 years since the end of the conflict, and my grandfather's a Marine and served in Vietnam. He flew Hueys, and he to me because he's just my favorite person in the whole world. He really is, and
Nice to hear.
yeah, he's incredible gentleman. But yeah, so it's just near and dear to my heart for that reason, but also because I think it's important to have these stories as a primary source. It just really is. But, okay, are we back on?
Yeah, we're back
Okay.
on. So, let's see. What advice did? Let me start over. What advice did you wish was given to you when you were enlisted?
That's a good question. I don't know that anybody could have given me any advice because you have to remember the time frame. We didn't have a war. My stepfather, who had been in the Air Force, told me about some of the things to expect, and he was right on target. So I wasn't surprised and he was talking about basic training. I wasn't surprised by things that happened because he kind of had warned me what the trainers, the DIs were going to be like, what the food was going to be like, what the marching and the stuff like that. So it wasn't a total shock to me when I went through it. That's the only advice I really got.
What advice would you give to people thinking about enlisting today?
If anybody today, and we've talked to young people in high schools, especially in the ROTC programs, who are thinking about the military, I would tell them, consider it, please. It helped me. It matured me, especially if there's not a war going on. It's a great time to go in the military because it does give you some stability. It does teach you something. Teaches you respect for one thing. A lot of young people could learn from that how to be respectful of others. I still say yes sir, no sir, because I was taught at 17 to do that by the military. And I think it's a good career. You learn some specific things that you could theoretically use. I have a grandson who went in the Air Force and learned how to be a mechanic in the Air Force. And he's a mechanic now. He's 35, 36 years old. And he's a mechanic from skills he learned in the military. Medics in the military can often get in the medical field once they get out, so on and so forth. There are things like that. But I would ask people to consider why to go. Go for the right reason. I went because there's nothing else to do. I didn't know what to do. And so if you want to learn something, I want to go represent my country, fine, go. But be prepared, understand what you're getting into. But I respect anybody, any man or woman who thinks I want to support my country. I'm all for that.
Has your opinions about the military and war in general changed over time? Like the view you had before joining after, the years since you've been out of
The view of the military hasn't changed. I respect the military tremendously. I know it can be bureaucratic at times, and the Pentagon sometimes. There's so many stories of paying exorbitant prices for hammers and toilets and stuff like that, and that's stupidity. But when it comes to preparing people how to defend our country, I think the military does an outstanding job. They're really good. What was the second part of that question? Ask me again.
How have your opinions about
War.
changed?
Yeah. My opinion about war has changed greatly. I don't think we should go to war unless there's specific reason. We get attacked, fight back. If one of our strongest allies is being attacked and asks for help, I think you go help. The third one could be argumentative, but if we perceive that our freedoms are being threatened by something, I think sending people to war, because you have to understand, when you commit to war, you're putting men and women's lives on the line. People are going to die. It better be for a good reason. Like I said before, you can get in, you know how to get out. What's the end game in mind? What are you going to say? I know there are people who hate the military and so on, and hate Vietnam. The veterans coming home were being spit upon, things. There's a line that I used at a speech one time I was giving, and that is, you don't have to hate the warrior to hate the war. Hate the war all you want. Don't blame the man or woman who has put his or her name on the line to defend this country. It's not their fault, not our fault. Don't hate us because we served this country. Hate the war all you want, but don't hate the warrior when you want to hate the war.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to add? Anything you want to share?
Again, a good question. There's so much, but you hit on the main points. What's it like being away from home, especially when you're young? At 17, did I get homesick? Of course I did, early on. But once I got into the routine, especially at Fort Benning, it was like a job. Either I worked from 8 to 4, or from 4 to 12, or from 12 to 8 at different shifts on a rotating schedule. And it's like punching a clock, going to work. And you have your meals or your time off, you go in town, whatever. You're leading a regular life. Vietnam was not quite like that, but you get used to routine and you get used to life. And you guys covered the points fairly well. I don't think there's anything else I would add, except that to anyone listening to this or watching this, if you are a Vietnam veteran, welcome home.
What do you wish more people knew about veterans?
Well, there are two things I wish more people knew about, and I think you've hit upon it off camera. We were talking about your grandfather and how important he is to you. That what I'm doing and what other people you're talking to are doing are telling the story, okay? And it's a story that people need to know. And tell me the question again. I apologize.
It's okay. What do you wish more people knew about veterans?
Okay, about veterans. To understand what a veteran does and who a veteran is. in early September, some of the schools, I know one thing, I think it's South Newton Elementary School, will have all the kids come out and sit outside, and there'll be a little parade honoring veterans throughout the parking lot. And I've been in it a couple of times already. And it's teaching those kids what a veteran is. Now, they don't know. Somebody has to teach them. And there's only about 1% of the population are veterans right now. And that number probably dwindling. But let people know that there are others who have served and how they should be honored. We do have a Memorial Day, which honors people who have sacrificed their lives for this country. We have Veterans Day, which I think that's my favorite holiday because it's the only, this is the only day in North Carolina that students are required not to go to school. You can set up school on Christmas Day if you wanted to, but by law, you cannot have class on Veterans Day. And I thought that's pretty cool. I like that kind of thing. Honor people. The Soldiers Parade they had last week in Newton honored veterans. I'd like people to know why they exist and how proud they should be of them. I think it was the second part to the question. I've already forgotten it, but
that was
okay.
That was the question.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
Perfect.
that was perfect.
Yeah.
I think that actually concludes it. This concludes the third interview for the Vietnam Veterans Oral History Project 2025.
Just one more, if I can. I
Yeah,
didn't mean to
please.
step on your closing there.
No, it's okay. We'll edit it out.
I belong to a group called Foothills Veterans of Veterans. I would like to get that out there because if people hear about us, everybody is welcome. You don't have to be a veteran to come to our meetings. You guys can come and talk about this project. You came to our Vietnam Veterans meeting. We meet every Friday morning, the Hickory Soup Kitchen at 9:00. You're more than welcome to come. We have about between 30 and 40 people usually show up, not all of whom are veterans. We have 2 widows who are part of our group. There's no fee to join. If you come to our meeting, you're one of us. And they told the story. Each of them told almost the same story about not knowing a whole lot about their husbands until they died. And going through their things, they found information about Vietnam and things of that nature. And so they urge people, and I'm urging people, what you're doing, I think is fantastic. Tell the stories. Don't hold on to them. Your family wants to know. This afternoon at 2:00, I'm going to the home of a veteran who's dying. I've been asked by hospice to do what's called a pinning ceremony. And I'm going to talk to the family. How much do they know about what he did? I think it's important for family to understand what their loved ones have gone through. Tell the stories. And I can hope we can get that message out. What you guys are doing is great. Encourage people to tell the stories. It doesn't do any good to keep things in. I liken it to a tea kettle. Mm-hmm. You keep things in. What happens to a tea kettle when it begins to boil? Well, it lets off steam, right? What would happen if it didn't let off steam?
Yeah.
We need to let off steam too. We can't keep things inside of us all the time. Telling the stories helps let off steam, and I think keeps us sane. So what you're doing is a great thing, helping people tell their stories, and I thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. This concludes the third oral history interview for the Vietnam Veterans Project 2025.
I hope you got some useful stuff out of that.
We did.